Day 75 of the war in Gaza and the IDF is moving towards the center of Khan Yunis, which is the largest remaining Hamas stronghold in the terrorist enclave. Troops reportedly came close to capturing or killing Hamas leaders Sinwar and Def. As Israel advanced, it received much-needed political backing from Britain. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
With international pressure mounting for Israel to end the war in Gaza, this statement from the British foreign minister gives an analysis of why Israel must be allowed to complete the job of destroying Hamas.
Everyone would love this fighting to stop now, but it's not sustainable if you stop permanently and Hamas are left in control of even one part of Gaza. So a sustainable solution means that Hamas are no longer a threat to Israel, that they've gone, that they're not capable of doing what they did on October the 7th.
On day 75 of the war in Gaza, troops reached the home of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, who is said to have narrowly escaped capture by IDF forces on 2 separate occasions. An additional brigade has now been deployed in Khan Yunis as the IDF makes a major push to reach and either capture or kill top Hamas leadership. Israeli media is reporting that the IDF is actively trying to reach Sinwar, as well as the commander of the Hamas military wing, Mohammed Def. Def had been thought by many to be paraplegic from previous wounds inflicted by Israel, but intelligence reports say that he is on his feet. Intelligence information gathered by the IDF while moving in on the Hamas leaders has reportedly indicated that both Sinwar and Def are on the move rather than remaining in any one place for an extended period. Sinwar is currently believed to be hiding in Khan Yunis after fleeing the north of the Strip by hiding in a humanitarian convoy heading south early in the terror group's war with Israel.
They deny the kidnapping of our children, the murder of our grandchildren, the rape of our daughters. The new Nazis we face today will stop at nothing to destroy civilization as we know it. The World Jewish Congress was created exactly for these times like this, so every Jew can fall asleep at night knowing they are safe in their own home. We are a voice for the Jewish people everywhere. We are the World Jewish Congress.
Reports on another potential deal for the return of Israeli hostages are gaining traction. Hamas political leader Ismail Hanieyeh is visiting Egypt, which, along with Qatar, is trying to mediate another pause in the Gaza war and release Palestinian security prisoners in exchange for some 40 Israelis held captive in Gaza. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Hamas political leader Ismail Hanieyeh is reportedly visiting Egypt for talks that could lead to the potential freeing of 40 out of the some 130 hostages still held in Gaza since the Hamas murderous rampage 75 days ago. Hamas leaders have publicly said that they will only free hostages in exchange for a permanent ceasefire. The reports in recent days have indicated talks for another truce to release more hostages may be advancing. Mediators are trying to broker an agreement that could bring home remaining women, sick, and elderly Israeli captives in exchange for a pause in Gaza fighting and the release of possibly hundreds of Hamas security prisoners. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met last night with some of the families of Israelis held hostage in Gaza and briefed them on efforts to reach a new deal. Netanyahu reportedly told the families that he was personally committed to the release of all the hostages. Netanyahu has said he'll allow another hostage deal, but the war to destroy Hamas will continue.
להפסיק את הלחימה, לסלק את כוחותינו, יש להם כל מיני דרישות. אז מה? אנחנו מבינים את זה. ברגע שאנחנו ניכנע לזה, חמאס ניצח. ואנחנו מחויבים גם לחסל אותו וגם להחזיר את חטופינו. אבל אנחנו לא נוותר, לא על היעד הזה ולא על היעד הזה.
Meanwhile, a sign of life from 2 elderly hostages. Islamic Jihad terror group published a propaganda video of hostages Gadi Moses and Elad Katsir, who were kidnapped from Kibbutz Nir Oz on October 7th.
Well, as Israel signals it's ready for negotiations with Hamas for the release of up to 40 captives in exchange for a pause in fighting, as well as the potential release of hundreds of Palestinian terrorists, Hamas leader Ismail Hanieyeh is traveling freely, boarding a flight to Cairo for talks on the war. Now, here to speak with us about the hostage situation and potential truce is Gershon Baskin, columnist and Middle East director of International Communities Organization. Gershon, thank you for being with us. What is your take on the proposed negotiations by Israel, and what would it include?
Well, I think it's first good to note that Israel took the initiative here and has relaunched the negotiations with Hamas through the Qataris and the Egyptians. I think it's a good sign that the talks are moving to Cairo, because I think the Egyptian regime and intelligence are much more aligned with Israel in terms of common goals and interest, much more than we are with the Qataris. And the Qataris, the Egyptians play a direct contact point with the Hamas in Gaza. We also understand that a representative of Islamic Jihad will be attending those talks in Cairo, which is also good because some of the hostages might be held by Islamic Jihad. I think that Israel signaled that it's willing to give another pause in the warfare. It's been reported in Israeli media of even up to 2 weeks, which I think is good, because it will provide with enough time for Hamas and Jihad and other groups to determine where all the missing hostages are that they claim are missing, in particular the 14 or 15 young women between the ages of 20 and 30 who were supposed to be brought out on the last deal and were not. And we could also see the return of some of the elderly hostages that we've seen in videos by Hamas and Islamic Jihad in the last days. And it's very important to bring them home as soon as possible as well.
Now, do you believe such a deal is actually possible to achieve? And would this be a sign of weakness from Israel in the fight against Hamas?
I don't think it's a sign of weakness at all. I think it's a sign of strength of Israel willing to do what's necessary to be done to bring its civilians home, its citizens home. Israel has a moral responsibility to do that, and I think it's good that the Israeli government is finally expressing the willingness to do that once again after the first round of hostage release took place. I think it's also important to understand that from Hamas's point of view, it's sufficient for them to hold on to the tens of soldiers, or those considered soldiers by them, for them to try to persuade Israel to negotiate the ultimate deal, which is what they really want, which is the release of all Palestinian prisoners from Israeli prison, a deal that seems very unlikely that Israel would agree to.
Now let's talk about Hamas leaders. We know they've been traveling freely while Gazans are facing a war. And it was just announced that Hanieyeh himself flew to Cairo for talks on the war. Do you believe Israel should allow such freedom of movement to these terrorist leaders?
I think that the first order of business is to get the hostages home. The Hamas leadership outside and inside can be dealt with at a later time. There's no doubt in my mind that the Israelis have targeted Hanieyeh and Mashal and Osama Hamdan and Khalil Chaya and all kinds of other Hamas leaders who are outside, along with Yahya Sinwar and the entire Hamas military leadership and political leadership in Gaza. Their day of reckoning can wait until we bring the hostages home. The war effort can wait until we bring the hostages home. That has to be the first thing that we're concerned with.
Now, when it comes to the ground operation, has the IDF advanced enough that they feel comfortable with a ceasefire? And perhaps more importantly, do you believe such a deal could ensure the release of our remaining hostages held by Hamas?
There's very little to ensure that a deal will bring home hostages until it actually happens. There's no reason for the parties to trust each other, and they don't. Both parties in these negotiations are dedicated to the destruction of the other side. So they're very bizarre negotiations. Whether the war effort has progressed enough, what's obvious is that battles are going on. They are very difficult. There are urban warfare in very dangerous places with lots of booby traps set by Hamas. And we are witnessing every day, unfortunately, the return of dead soldiers. So I think that it would be good to have a break of a week or 2 weeks when no one is coming back dead, when we see hostages coming back alive. We need time to regroup and rethink. The Americans are putting pressure on us to move into a new phase of the war. The army needs time to do the planning in order to do that. I think it would be good all around for this to happen. Certainly also for the people of Gaza, who now 2 million of them are homeless and have no places to return to.
Well, that is all we have time for today. Gershon Baskin, thank you so much for your insights.
You're very welcome.
The IDF announced the name of 2 fallen soldiers killed fighting against Hamas terrorists in the southern Gaza Strip, bringing the grand total to Israel's ground offensive to 134. Captain Lior Sivan, 32, from Beit Shemesh, an officer in the Harel Brigade's 363 Battalion. Staff Sergeant Major Uriel Cohen, 33 years old, from Tzur Hadassah, a tank commander in the Givati Brigade. Fallen heroes, may they be of blessed memory.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
Well, the United Nations is once again calling for a ceasefire and has proposed a vote on a new resolution demanding an end to the hostilities in the Security Council. ILTV's William Sharon has the latest.
The UN Security Council is set to vote on a resolution calling for a major increase in international aid to Gaza, as well as an immediate ceasefire. The vote expected today has already seen multiple delays as the UN is seeking language which the United States will not veto. The U.S. objected to the initial proposed language, which should demand a cessation of hostilities, and instead said it may consider a suspension of hostilities. This vote comes after the U.S. has already vetoed not one, but 2 UN resolutions, which called for a ceasefire in Gaza on December 9th and again on December 18th. While the UN continues its disproportionate focus on Israel, the U.S. has thus far remained steadfast in opposition to demanding a ceasefire due to the failure to adequately condemn Hamas and its role in the October 7th massacre. Some diplomats are now scrambling to resolve to avoid the U.S. veto. The UN General Assembly also passed a non-binding resolution remanding a ceasefire this week, adding pressure to the U.S. not to veto the issue in the Security Council. Despite the U.S. has remained supportive of Israel's right to defend itself by eliminating Hamas, though officials from the Biden administration have expressed concern to Israel. The now twice-delayed vote will take place today in the afternoon.
As over 130 hostages remain in the Gaza Strip in Hamas captivity, a new report from NBC has disturbing updates about the kidnapping of Israeli civilians, including an Israeli young woman named Noah Aamani. ILTV's Devo Klein has the latest.
A new NBC investigation reveals that Israeli hostage Noah Aamani, who was kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival on October 7th, may have been abducted by Palestinian civilians who joined in the October 7th attacks, not Hamas terrorists. Noah's kidnapping went viral after a video of her being dragged away on a motorcycle while her boyfriend was bound by Palestinians was widely shared on social media. As Noah's family demands answers as to her well-being and why she, as a civilian, was not released during the pause in fighting, NBC's report examined text messages, phone calls, and surveillance photos, which showed Hamas may not even know where Noah is. The last footage released later on October 7th shows Noah sitting down on a sofa drinking water, while 2 men's feet are visible in the frame, presumably in Gaza captivity. Evidence from October 7th reveals that hundreds of Palestinians joined in the Hamas massacre who were not officially Hamas members, among them potentially criminal elements. Based on the time of day of Noah's kidnapping, as well as the faces of her kidnappers, it appears Noah may have been kidnapped by a group of Palestinian civilian men. These developments show the complexity of this conflict with the blurring of lines on the Palestinian side between civilians and combatants. Meanwhile, Noah had been held for over 2 months in captivity, and her condition is unknown, with friends and family waiting painfully for answers.
Since October 7th, many airlines have temporarily canceled flights to Israel due to the Israel-Gaza war. But after over 2 months, that may finally be changing. ILTV's William Sharon has the latest.
German airline Lufthansa has announced they will resume flights to Tel Aviv starting January 8th, making them one of the first international airlines to resume flights. Most international carriers have paused all flights to Israel following the October 7th massacre, but other airlines are expected to follow Lufthansa in the move. U.S. Airlines Delta and American Airlines both said they are still evaluating the situation, but are not presently resuming flights. Delta Airlines plans to resume, as of now, only at the end of March, where United Airlines said flights will resume when conditions permit. In Europe, British Airways has suspended flights to Tel Aviv through January 10th, rolling suspended flights until January 13th. While Delta has not yet resumed flights, they have announced a new code-share agreement with El Al Airlines, the only airline currently flying in and out of Tel Aviv, that streamlines to 280 destinations and connecting flights for those traveling from Israel to the United States.
The war in Gaza is continuing, but so is the war on campus. Jewish students are increasingly under attack by pro-Hamas campus mobs, and the universities, in particular Ivy League schools, have received harsh criticism from the public to the U.S. Congress for their refusal to deal with extremist anti-Semitic hate on their campuses. Now, here to speak with us is Assistant Professor at Columbia University, Shai Davidai, who's been outspoken about the failures of Columbia University to deal with anti-Semitism from October 7th. Shai, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for dealing with this really important topic.
So we know that the campus hate groups like Students for Justice in Palestine and also the Jewish Voice for Peace were suspended from Columbia's campus for their calls to genocide against Jews and harassment of Jewish students. But you recently shared a video from last week showing them holding an unauthorized event on campus inciting this same violence against Jews. Now, what has the university's response been?
Yeah, well, we need to set the record straight. They were suspended not for calling for the genocide of Jews. Apparently, that's still acceptable at Columbia. They were not suspended for endangering Jewish or Israeli students or for disrupting student life. The only reason they were suspended is because they held two unauthorized protests and that broke the rules of the university, that broke their policies. So they were basically suspended on a technicality. And then the irony is that they keep holding these unauthorized events. So one, they're not allowed to hold any event on campus, and they still hold events. Two, they announced that they'll be holding protests. The university has said that they will not allow the protest to keep going. And yet they held the protest, and the university has done absolutely nothing about that. And three, mere 3 days after the university said that calls for violence are against the school conduct, in their protest, we saw that they were shouting the same violent calls for intifada, for the annihilation of Jews from Israel. So the university has done absolutely nothing about it. They are unwilling to do anything about it. And in fact, if you look at the videos and the pictures that I and many others have posted and made public, you see that university administrators and deans are actually there to help the students. So they are attending the protests. They may not be participating, but they are allowing the protest to keep going, and they're trying to, quote unquote, contain the protests, even though they are unauthorized protests by suspended groups calling for violence.
Now, why do you think the university and other universities as well are so reluctant to deal with this issue head on?
You know, I wish I had an easy answer for this. I think it's partly cowardice. I've been told that I should not use this word, but it is cowardice. They're just afraid to enforce their own rules. It's partially callousness. They just don't care when it involves Jewish lives and Israeli lives. And they just think this will go away. They just think that if they don't do anything, that the students will quiet down. What they don't realize is that the hundreds of thousands of Jewish and Israeli faculty, staff, and students all across the US, we're not going away. We will keep fighting this because this is a civil rights issue. This is not about, this is not a Jewish problem. This is society's problem. And that's what's going to happen. They think they can just wait us out. And we're here to tell them, you cannot wait us out. You cannot get rid of us because we have a right, just like any other ethnic group, for protection. This is also a Title VI issue. Columbia University is my employer. They have a federal responsibility to protect me, which they are failing. And I believe that we will start seeing lawsuits at Columbia and other universities all around the country because they are not treating all groups equally.
Now, we've seen some similar responses to this anti-Semitism on campus from the president of Harvard, most recently UPenn, and many are speculating that the financial influence of Qatar has a role to play in the university's placating terror support. Do you believe that's the case?
Look, I really, I'm an academic. I try to stay intellectually humble. I don't know because I don't have all the facts, right? They always say follow the money. And it does seem somewhat weird that the universities, not just Columbia, but all across the US, have billions of dollars of funding from foreign agents that they have not reported, right? Even if it's not the reason, it's a bad look, right? When you get billions of dollars from a government that is known to support Hamas, and at the same time, you allow pro-Hamas organizations to roam freely on your campus, then, it's up to you to connect the dots. I don't know. But clearly, there's something that is holding back the universities from actually doing anything.
Indeed, definitely suspicious, to say the least. Well, I think we are out of time, but I want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us and, of course, for your courage in pushing back against some of the extremism that we're seeing on campus. We're all with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, this is Joel Rosenberg, editor of All Israel News. Sign up for our free daily email for the latest news from Jerusalem. Go to allisrael.com.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies and heavy wind expected tonight around the country, with lows of around 13 degrees Celsius or 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, wind should pick up slightly with partly cloudy skies and temperatures reaching highs of 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channels, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.